He stood silently near the entrance of the mosque, his eyes following the gentle rhythm of movement inside. Curious, a bit unsure, and holding on to a question he thought was simple: why do Muslims wash before they pray? It seemed like a ritual, a habit performed out of routine. But something in the way the worshippers moved, the calm on their faces, and the quiet dignity in their actions, told him there was more. He didn't expect the answer to shake something inside him. What he discovered wasn't about soap or water, but about the soul, intention, and the kind of purity that can't be seen with the eyes. Wudu. The act of washing hands, face, arms, and feet is not just preparation for prayer, it's a spiritual reset. As each drop of water runs down the skin, it carries away the dust of the world, the noise of the day, and the weight of distractions. It is a declaration that for the next few moments, nothing matters more than standing before the Creator with a clean body and a clean heart. That realization alone made him pause. In his own world, spirituality often felt rushed or distant. But here, in this quiet act of washing, there was peace. There was purpose. The Imam gently explained to him that wudu is not just about physical cleanliness. It's about a mental and spiritual transition. It marks the line between the world outside and the sacred moment of connection with God. Just like someone wouldn't walk into a special meeting or a sacred place without preparing, Muslims take a moment to honor that preparation every time they pray. And that idea that God deserves our best, our most present selves, left a deep impression on him. It made prayer feel less like a task and more like a moment of love, honesty, and surrender. As he watched the worshippers complete their ablution, he noticed how their faces lit up with a sense of readiness. Not just clean skin, but clear minds. Their hands, now pure, were ready to rise in prayer. Their hearts, softened by the act, were open to meaning. It wasn't just water. It was a spiritual reminder, a call back to the essence of faith, humility, mindfulness, and reverence. He felt something shift within himself. A practice he once saw as foreign began to feel familiar, even beautiful. In a world that moves so fast, where people rarely pause before doing anything, here was a faith that asked you to slow down, to be still, to prepare yourself not just physically, but inwardly too. That touched him more than he could admit. This wasn't about converting or changing religions. It was about understanding, about opening his heart to the quiet, profound layers of a belief he had never taken the time to see. The simple act of washing became a doorway to something deeper, something universal. And as he left the mosque that day, he wasn't carrying just an answer to his question. He was carrying a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. He had always thought of religious rituals as nothing more than habits passed down through generations, actions performed without much thought, out of tradition rather than meaning. So when he first heard that Muslims washed before every prayer, he assumed it was just a cultural thing, a way to stay clean or disciplined. But the day he stood quietly in a mosque and witnessed it with his own eyes, his assumptions began to crumble. What he saw wasn't routine. It was reverence. It was peace. It was something far deeper than just washing. As he observed the men performing wudu, washing their hands, mouths, faces, arms, wiping over their heads, and finally their feet, there was something calming in the rhythm. Each motion seemed to carry intention, as if they weren't just cleansing the body, but also clearing their minds. There were no rushed movements, no distractions, just focus. It was like a transition from the chaos of the world into a space of stillness and sacred connection. He realized this wasn't about cleaning dirt. This was about shedding stress, ego, and anything that didn't belong in the presence of God. Someone kindly explained to him that wudu is a symbolic purification. It's an act of resetting the soul. Before standing in front of the Creator, a Muslim takes a few moments to cleanse, not only physically but spiritually. Every drop of water that falls carries away the weight of the day, the mistakes, the noise. It prepares the believer to pray with humility, clarity, and sincerity. That concept hit him unexpectedly hard. He had never prepared like that for any form of worship in his own life. It made him wonder what it would feel like to approach prayer with that level of presence. He left the mosque that day not just with an answer, but with an insight that would stay with him. He understood now why Muslims wash before they pray. It wasn't a rule, it was a reminder. A beautiful way of saying, I'm about to stand before the one who created me. Let me be ready in body, mind, and soul. And somehow that simple act of water meeting skin became one of the most spiritual things he had ever witnessed. He returned the next day, drawn not by obligation but by curiosity. The serenity he had seen in that small act of wudu lingered in his mind. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was powerful. Watching again from a quiet corner, he noticed how the believers approached the tap with calm purpose. No rush, no performance. Each person took their time, washing their hands, mouth, face, arms, and feet with focus and care. It was like watching someone enter a sacred state, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. As he stood there, he remembered how someone had told him, it's not just about water, it's about intention. That idea echoed in his mind as he observed a young man gently splash water over his face, eyes closed, as if feeling every drop. It wasn't about scrubbing or cleansing dirt. It was about pausing to breathe, to let go, to center the heart before turning to God. And suddenly, he began to understand. The world outside moved fast, demanding attention, distractions, pressure. But here, in these few minutes of wudu, there was a reset, a break from the storm. He had never thought that something so simple could be so meaningful. He had seen rituals in other places, some grand, some cold, but this one was different. It was quiet and deeply personal. Wudu wasn't for show. It wasn't about impressing others or meeting some standard of piety. It was between the worshiper and their Lord, a moment of respect, a moment of readiness. The more he watched, the more it moved him. What he once saw as a routine now appeared as a doorway, a passage into sacred space. The preparation wasn't just for prayer, it was for transformation. Each time the water touched the skin, it was as though the heart was reminded of its purpose. He had come looking for answers, but what he found was something that softened him, not with words or arguments, but through the quiet beauty of faith in action. He found himself wondering what it would feel like to prepare like that before anything important in life. Not just prayer, but every meaningful moment. The act of wudu had begun to affect him in ways he couldn't explain. It wasn't just what he saw in others. It was what it made him feel inside. It stirred something that had long been buried under layers of routine, disappointment, and disbelief. He wasn't a religious person, not in the traditional sense, but he understood sincerity when he saw it. And in those few moments of washing, he saw pure sincerity. What touched him most was how equal everyone seemed during wudu. There were no titles, no judgments, just people standing side by side, preparing for something beyond themselves. It reminded him of simplicity, of humility. In a world obsessed with appearances and achievements, here was a community that paused several times a day to remind themselves, we came from dust, and to dust we shall return. But in between, we have moments where we can connect, where we can cleanse, where we can remember. Someone handed him a small book explaining the significance of purification in Islam. As he read through the gentle words, he discovered how water isn't just a physical necessity in Islam, but a symbol of spiritual rebirth. Every time a Muslim performs wudu, it's like beginning again, starting fresh with a clean slate. That resonated deeply with him. He had always believed people should get second chances, that life should allow space for renewal. And now he saw that Islam offered that opportunity every single day, 5 times a day. That night, as he lay in bed, he kept thinking about the look of peace on their faces after wudu. It was subtle, but it was there. Like a weight lifted, like a silent, "I'm ready now." He wasn't ready to become someone else, to change his identity or declare anything grand. But he knew one thing: he respected what he had seen. He admired the discipline, the quiet devotion, and the humility. And in a strange, unexpected way, it inspired him to look deeper, not just at Islam, but at his own heart. A few days later, he walked into the mosque again, not as a stranger, but as someone searching for something he couldn't quite name. The man who had once questioned why Muslims wash before prayer was now drawn to it. He sat near the wudu area and simply watched. No camera, no notebook, just his eyes and an open heart. He watched young boys smiling while performing wudu alongside elders whose hands trembled slightly from age. Yet the motion was the same, the purpose the same, the peace the same. One of the worshippers saw him watching and offered him a smile, a gesture so warm it broke whatever hesitation he had. They spoke briefly, and the worshipper explained that wudu is not just a washing. It's a moment of alignment between the outer and inner world. A Muslim prepares not just to talk to God, but to stand in his presence, conscious, clean, and clear. That line stayed with him. He thought about how rarely he prepared like that for anything. He rushed into meetings, conversations, even rest. But here, before the most important moments of the day, they stopped to cleanse and center themselves. He was invited to try it. At first he hesitated, but then he stood, walked over, and gently let the water touch his hands. There was no ceremony, no pressure, just a quiet invitation to feel. As he moved through the steps, following what he'd observed, something unexpected happened. It wasn't dramatic, but it was deep. With each motion, he felt more present. The coldness of the water made him alert. The repetition made him mindful. And by the end, he wasn't just clean, he was calm. He didn't say much afterward. He just sat quietly, processing what had happened. It was the first time in a long time that he had done something spiritual without expectation. And that space, gentle, respectful, open, gave him something he hadn't even known he was missing: a sense of peace, a touch of humility, and a glimpse of what it means to truly prepare not just the body but the soul for something greater than the world. Later that evening, he found himself walking alone, reflecting on the experience with a kind of silence he wasn't used to. For someone who always had answers, always needed to analyze, always demanded evidence, this moment left him with no words, only feeling. The wudu, the prayer, the people, it all came together in a quiet lesson. Sometimes transformation doesn't need noise. Sometimes truth arrives in whispers. He remembered something one of the worshippers said, almost in passing. We don't just wash our bodies. We wash away distraction, ego, and the dust of this world. That sentence played over and over in his mind. It felt like poetry, but also like a mirror. How much of his life had been covered in that dust? Ego, pride, doubt, bitterness. How many times had he needed a reset, but never allowed himself one? Now, through a simple act, he saw that Islam had built that reset into everyday life. He had grown up thinking religion was either too strict or too emotional. But what he saw in the mosque wasn't either. It was balanced, grounded. It wasn't about proving you're better than someone. It was about remembering you're a servant. That kind of humility was rare and beautiful. He wasn't ready to declare himself a believer, but he couldn't deny something had shifted. The way the Muslims treated him, with kindness, without judgment, moved him more than any debate ever could. No one forced anything. No one demanded he change. They simply lived their faith in front of him. And that silent confidence in their way of life touched something deep inside him. That night, for the first time in years, he prayed. He didn't follow any format. He didn't even know who he was praying to. But he whispered into the silence of his room, asking for peace, for guidance, for clarity. And somehow, deep down, he felt heard. He didn't need to understand everything. He just needed to take one step closer to the truth. And he knew he had already begun. In the days that followed, he found himself drawn more and more to the simplicity and purity of what he had experienced. There were no grand gestures or sermons that had influenced him, just quiet moments, sincere actions, and a sense of calm that had settled into his heart. He realized something profound. Islam wasn't about impressing others or performing faith. It was about consistency, connection, and a deep respect for life's spiritual rhythm. Every time he passed by the mosque now, he paused. Not always to enter, but to listen. The call to prayer that once felt foreign now brought him comfort. It reminded him of people he barely knew, but who had treated him like a brother. It reminded him of water flowing gently over the hands, of a heart slowly opening, of questions transforming into peace. The man who once scoffed at faith now found beauty in its quiet moments. One evening, he sat down to write about his experience. As a writer, words had always been his power, but this time they failed him. How do you explain being changed by watching someone wash their hands? How do you describe the weight of a single act that cleaned not just the skin, but the soul? His writing that night was not analytical. It was personal, raw, honest. He ended his journal with one sentence. I don't know what I believe, but I believe something happened to me. It wasn't a conversion. It wasn't a dramatic announcement. It was something more important. An awakening. An opening of the heart. A realization that in a world full of noise, the deepest truths often arrive in silence. Through kindness, through ritual, through sincerity. He didn't know where this path would lead him, but he no longer feared it. He welcomed the journey, step by step, just like wudu, beginning with intention, ending with peace. In a world constantly rushing forward, where noise often drowns out meaning, this man's quiet encounter with Islam became a turning point. He came in with questions, skepticism, and assumptions, but left with something far more powerful: inner stillness. What touched him wasn't a speech or a debate. It was the calm dignity in how Muslims prepared to speak with their Creator. The act of wudu, so simple on the surface, turned out to be a gateway to something deeper. It wasn't about water alone. It was about respect, intention, and humility. He saw that Islam didn't demand blind belief. It invited sincere reflection. It didn't push him away with rules. It pulled him in with its beauty. And in that invitation, he felt something stir in his heart that had long been silent. He might not have declared anything yet, but he knew something had changed inside him. A seed of understanding had been planted. A door had quietly opened. To anyone watching this, remember, sometimes all it takes is one moment, one experience, to shift a person's entire perspective. It could be the sound of the adhan, the sight of prayer, or the feel of cool water in wudu. Never underestimate the power of sincerity. Thank you for watching this journey of the heart. If it moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep your heart open, because sometimes the answers come when you least expect them, but exactly when you need them most.